This European bison was recently released in the Romanian portion of the Carpathians, one of the largest mountain ranges in Europe. If you go back in time, you'll see that Romania has been releasing these 1,700-pound giants into their mountains for more than 10 years. For instance, in this 2014 video, the southern. Even though bison consume a lot of vegetation, imagine a male eating 130 pounds of food a day, and their diet contains the exact things we want to protect: shoots, leaves, and various types of grass. The Carpathians saw 18 new individuals all at once. In addition, bison can simply rub themselves against trees or even pull them out by. For instance, a bison is rolling in the dirt, seemingly mocking the people who are working to preserve the Carpathian environment, and then one of them excavates a hole, giving the impression that Romania has chosen to eradicate all mountain ecosystems. However, each bison release is actually a part of a well-thought-out plan to save the southern Carpathians, which we will reveal. Bison used to roam around here and throughout Europe in the past, but as you can see, if they are being released in Romania, the European giants are having problems now, and no, it's not human fault as it usually is. Recently, the Polish Academy of Sciences conducted a thorough simulation and came to the conclusion: human influence continued to play a role in the decline of the European bison population, which began 14,700 years ago due to warming and its effects on the species' habitat. After encountering humans, bison faced hunting, which directly reduced their numbers, and agriculture and logging, which reduced their living area, resulting in an ever-decreasing number of bison. When firearms became available in the 1500s, people's ability to hunt was greatly increased. However, by the 20th century, there were only two populations of bison remaining in Europe, the largest of which was in Poland's Bolesław Forest, where there were roughly 600 of them. Locals attempted to save these bison, but World War I intervened. Came and German troops nearly destroyed this population. Only 9 animals remained at that point. Wild bison continued to roam in some places and were even occasionally sighted until 1927, when many experts concur that the last European bison was killed. This had a disastrous effect. Only 12 wild bison were ever seen again. The rest were kept in zoos and private collections. However, let's turn our attention to Romania, specifically the Tarcu Mountains in the southern Carpathians, where research indicates that there hasn't been a single wild bison for 200 years. Human development, hunting, farming, and deforestation all contributed to the disappearance of today's heroes in Romania as well. These processes continued even after the bison vanished, transforming the mountains into something like this. The Carpathians were once bare lands entirely devoid of any forest cover. Due to the removal of 74,900 forest plots between 2000 and 2022, the southern Carpathians' forest cover decreased from 5 million acres to 7 million. There was a mere 8% reduction in 2 million acres. 6%, however. The Carpathians, including the southern portion, are regarded as one of Europe's most significant and richest nature reserves. Here you'll find 30% of Europe's flora, the largest populations of brown bears, wolves, lynxes, and rare bird species. Even a small loss of local forests can have disastrous consequences. Because of the rich forest cover that is dropped by what may appear to be a minor 8, the Carpathians are designated by the World Wildlife Fund as one of the planet's most biodiverse ecoregions. 6%. Do you believe that the only way humans have impacted the environment is by destroying forests? Of course not. As a habitat that was once a hotspot for biodiversity, meadows have also suffered from intensive farming. However, in many parts in the southern Carpathians, they no longer look like they did before. In Romania, they discovered that bison could actually be the solution for Carpathian forests and meadows, helping to restore the ecosystem. The only issue is that they're the most. People finally put an end to the needless slaughter of bison in the 21st century, which resulted in dwindling populations throughout Europe. Additionally, a proactive organization called Rewilding Europe, supported by the World Wildlife Fund, loaded up some transport and transported bison to the Romanian mountains. This is precisely how the largest European bison reintroduction project began. As 2014 rolled around, Rewilding Europe took bison from breeding stations across Europe, from Sweden to central Italy, and transported them to the municipality of Armas in Romania's southern Carpathians. Today, there are 17 giants. The southern Carpathian mountains didn't have to wait for them to move onto land where their kind hadn't been for more than 200 years, but everyone involved in the reintroduction project already knew that this wasn't the end of the story, and that the goal was to increase the population because the local ecosystems needed a lot of help. The last bison release occurred on May 31, 2024, when 14 new saviors of local ecosystems arrived in the Romanian Carpathians. Since then, Rewilding Europe has been collecting bison from all over Europe and relocating them to the appropriate locations annually. The total number of animals added to the area has already reached 190. Already a significant accomplishment given that there haven't been any bison in this area for a few hundred years, but no one intends to stop, at least not since the 2014 plan called for the population to reach 500 individuals. If there were any questions about this, biologists wouldn't call a species keystone for no apparent reason. Picture a bison strolling through a forest or an area where only grass grows. Several seeds can cling to its fur, turning it into a green carrier. The seeds can then fall off and begin to grow elsewhere. But that's not all, as you may have noticed at the beginning of the scientists explain that the bison's habit of rolling around helps the animal reduce skin irritation from insect bites. Another theory is that bison have a social behavior where males pee in puddles and then roll around in them to demonstrate their dominance over rivals, competing for a favored female's attention. But more importantly, when a bison rolls around, it removes plants, including weeds, from the ground. If there were seeds on its fur when it began rolling, the bison essentially creates a spot that is ready for them to grow, according to Reen. Since bison in Europe can spread up to 200 different types of plants, they have a significant impact on reclaiming the southern Carpathians' meadows and forests. However, these enormous animals typically don't carry seeds. Instead, they simply devour any greenery they come across. On average, they consume 133 pounds of food every day. Naturally, this removes the grass and leaves from the trees, but everything will grow back. The bison may also ingest seeds and food, which eventually reappear. What happens next? Seeds and manure may sprout, turning into grass or trees where you have forgotten there had ever been any greenery, and bison produce a lot of. As disagreeable as it may sound, a lot of manure packed with seeds is essentially a boost for areas severely damaged by human activity. You can't forget that it's a double boost because everything that comes out of a bison is a natural fertilizer that helps plants grow, as we've already discussed. In Romania's southern Carpathians, 190 people work to create and preserve a semi-wooded, semi-open landscape of trees, bushes, and grass that is neither a forest nor a meadow. Beavers are the architects and engineers of ecosystems, and bison are their rightful colleagues. This type of landscape is highly unstable in between because it is easily overtaken by trees. At that point, the bison enter the scene and eat the young trees and shrubs, which inhibits the growth of the forest and creates those semi-open areas. Although you may believe that bison actually impede the recovery of forests, this is untrue. Firstly, animals spread seeds and are unable to completely control the spread of trees everywhere. Secondly, scientists claim that creating meadows adjacent to forests is even better than having a solid forest for the simple reason that it allows more species to live. According to Rewilding Europe, restoring semi-open habitats with many herbivores, birds, and insects that had to flee their homes due to unfavorable conditions and the appearance of predators feeding on other species are brought in by bison. For instance, in this instance, a bison rubbed against a tree, leaving behind some fur which a bird then used to construct its nest. This is an obvious example of how, since bison can benefit other species simply by existing, everything that Europe has done to help the area is actually very effective. The southern Carpathian Mountains will benefit ecologically greatly from the return of bison. But how can you discuss ecology without mentioning reducing carbon emissions? You might assume that bison have nothing to do with this, or perhaps only a small amount, but the Yale School of the Environment disagrees. They studied the area and found that bison peacefully grazing on the 19 square miles could potentially absorb 54,000 tons of carbon annually. For comparison, if you remove all the bison from that area, it turns out that they absorb 8 times less carbon dioxide. But how exactly do bison affect carbon dioxide? They graze, processing nutrients that help fertilize the soil and all of its life forms, and they also compact the soil to prevent the release of stored carbon. In other words, bison simply live their lives, which is another reason to increase the number of bison introduced back into the wild. Programs throughout Europe and even beyond, particularly since Rewilding Europe has set a good example and made significant strides in this area. However, the organization is not content to stop there. Given birth and death rates, roughly half of the population must be genetically viable. Since the entire population of bison in the Tara Mountains was born in the wild, their range has been continuously expanding and is currently estimated to be around 143 square miles. This is the fastest range expansion of any similar European projects, and participants attribute this to the fact that the animals do not receive additional feeding. Unlike a number of other populations of freely roaming European bison, but despite all of that, the population must reach 150 mature breeding individuals in order to remain genetically healthy, which means that there should be between 350 and 400 animals overall. It may seem like this outcome will take a while to materialize, but Europe offers hope. If the population in these southern Carpathians continues to grow at the current rate, There's a good chance that by 2030, there will be 350 to 450 bison. It's important to note that actively restoring bison populations isn't a strategy being implemented only in Romania. Many European countries are currently endeavoring to restore these giants to their historic habitats. As you recall, following World War I, there were only 9 remaining bison in Poland. By 1964, the population had increased to over 100, and by 2014, it had surpassed 1,400. By the end of 2019, there were 2,269 bison in Poland, and in 2025, the news revealed that the number of bison had reached a record 3,000, with the total population increasing by about 15 to 18% annually. As a result, the country is now rightfully regarded as the world's center for breeding European bison. The Poles provided their bison with such ideal breeding conditions that one of the males, named Pol, began to stand out excessively. Since you can tell by his peers that a bison is content in captivity, Pol simply refused to return to the wild and socialize with other bison. In 2006, they released him close to a herd of bison, and the newbie briefly interacted with his own kind before losing all interest in this dull ecosystem architect way of life. Began searching for human contact, which he discovered in the form of some tourists enjoying a picnic nearby. At first, the people were alarmed, but they soon realized the bison was docile and could only harm them with awkward movements. Efforts to reintegrate Pol into the wild continued, but the bison kept coming close. The bison was frequently seen wandering around local villages, chasing after cars and interacting with people as he repeatedly broke out of his enclosures. You could say that Pol even became a culturally significant figure in Poland, as he is mentioned in a number of books and articles. He is the subject of a poem and an award-winning ballad. Are there many documentaries about particular animals? No, but there is one about Pooh, which you are currently watching on your screens. This film even won some awards at a film festival before being shown to elementary school students in 2008. All things considered, it's difficult to find an animal with this level of popularity and genuine significance to a particular nation. So you could say Poland is a sort of hot spot for talented animals. But that's not all the accomplishments of the country of bison, because as the largest animal population, Poland has also turned into a donor, sending its animals for instance, in Romania, which we discussed today, there's information that Polish bison ended up in Russia, Moldova, Denmark, and most recently in 2024, Portugal. They were also introduced to the UK through a project called Wilderbleen, which carried out the reintroduction in the nation and fulfilled the dream of those who wished to travel back in time. For the first time in 6,000 years, true bison made their appearance on UK soil this year. The project was even named one of the biggest changes of 2025. You can imagine how important it is for some countries to restore their bison population. Ultimately, with a lot of assistance from the European Bison Center, there are currently about 7,500 European bison living on our globe, is not as awful as the 12 animals that were counted this century. Population growth demonstrates that humans does wish to correct its errors. That's unquestionably a positive thing.